رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله بارئ الخلائق الأجمعين، باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء حبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين، لا سيما ولي الله الحجة ابن الحسن صاحب الأمر والزمان. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم وعلى منكري فضائلهم من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. آمين رب العالمين. أما بعد، قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه الحكيم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نحن أقرب إليه من حبل الوريد. صدق الله العلي العظيم وآمنا به. نوروا مجالسكم بذكر محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. Ahibbai, we raise our hands in dua by the sake of Imam Bab al-Hawa'ij, Mawlaya wa Mawla al-Kawnain, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far Al-Qadim, alayhi salam, and we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by the sake of Bab al-Hawa'ij that the difficulties for the pandemic and the environment in which we're surrounded, through the grace of Imam Al-Qadim, Babul Hawa'ij, may these difficulties be erased from us, for the mu'mineen are able to congregate in the fastest of times to uphold the commemoration of Ahlul Bayt and to reignite and to reinforce the spark of wilayah within them. Ya Allah, by the sake of Imam Al-Qadim, grant us the opportunity to congregate, to celebrate and to commemorate and to lament the occasions of Ali Muhammad together as an ummah. Ya Allah, by the sake of Imam Bab al-Hawa'ij, Ya Allah, grant us the opportunity to perform the ziyarah of Imamain al-Qadimain in Madinatul Salam in the fastest of times. Ya Allah, by the sake of Imam al-Qadim, Ya Allah, Bab al-Hawa'ij. Mu'mineen and mu'minat who are not in the best of health, you grant them shafa'ah. Ya Allah, by the sake of Imam Al-Qadim, Bab al-Hawa'ij, mu'mineen and mu'minat who have hajat, Ya Allah, do not let any one of them turn away except that you have fulfilled their hajat. Ya Allah, grant us entry into Jannah through passage by Bab al-Hawa'ij, Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam. Ya Allah, keep our children on the path of wilayah and upon Sirat al-Mustaqim by the grace of Imam Bab al-Hawa'ij, and by his sake, Ya Allah, strengthen us in our belief such that we are deserving to be from amongst the Ansar and the Ashab of Maulana Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman. All of this with the barakat of allowed salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. Ahibba'i, our kalam today in regards to some of the circumstances that surrounded and that marked the period of the execution of the imamate of our seventh blessed Imam, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far Al-Qadim, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi wa ruhi lahul fida. And it is important that as we mark the commemoration, as we commemorate the martyrdom of this madloom Imam, Imam Al-Qadim, an Imam who is underappreciated, unfortunately, from those who claim or those who subscribe to the school of Tashayyu', as well as those who do not subscribe to the school of Tashayyu'. Many times it seems that the importance and the weight is downplayed in regards to the lifetime's contributions and the tragedies of Imam Al-Khadim, when in reality he played a central role in ensuring that you and I have a deen to follow today. For you find that in order to understand the times of Imam Al-Khadim alayhi salam and the role that Imam Al-Khadim Ruhi Lahul Fida played, it is important for us to understand a summary, or to understand and have a summary of the contributions of the time of Imam As-Sadiq, his father, Ja'far ibn Muhammad, Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad As-Sadiq, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, and the impact that he had upon the Islamic Ummah. For it is understood and it is well written by the historians that it was during the time of Imam al-Baqir and the time of Imam al-Sadiq that a revolution spread across the Muslim Ummah like an uncontrollable flame. A revolution on one hand that marked the spread of knowledge and ilm, that marked the spread of spirituality and theological belief and faith across the Muslim Ummah. For during the time of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, as Bani Umayyah and Bani Abbas were involved in a political material struggle over rulership and over the throne, Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam laid the foundations to set this revolution of ilm, the spread of divine knowledge throughout the Muslim empire and throughout the Muslim lands. And you find that after Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, Imam Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi took it upon himself, and rather this was the God-given function to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam to build on the foundations of this knowledge-based revolution and this madrasa of Imam al-Baqir to ensure that ilm in its entirety was spread in the east and the west of the Islamic empire and beyond. For it was during the time of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam that Shiaism and Tashayyu' got the highest level of publicity, and the teachings that represent the school of Ahlul Bayt got the greatest exposure, as Bani Abbas were busy settling and reinforcing their power over the throne and this temporal khilafah that they had claimed for themselves. For it is during the time of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, the Sheikh al-Mufid rahmatullah alayhi in Kitab al-Irshad says that as Imam al-Sadiq sat on the pulpit in Masjid al-Kufa and he delivered his lectures in theology and logic and in Islamic sciences, there were over 1,000 of the greatest scholars who would be in the presence of Imam al-Sadiq, and each and every one of them, when they returned back to their respective regions or their respective lands and would convey Islamic teachings to the masses, they would say, Qala Ja'far ibn Muhammad. They would all return back to the source of their knowledge as being Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. For the east and the west of the Islamic empire was bursting with this revolution, a knowledge-based revolution, where an entire civilization not only came to birth, but a civilization that was blossoming on the basis of culture and on the basis of knowledge. A civilization in its entirety began to blossom due to the teachings and the ilm of Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam. And this was not only restricted to the field of theology and religion and spirituality and morality. Rather, you find that the knowledge of Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam encompassed all Islamic sciences, the likes of which you have students Jabir bin Hayyan, a revered scholar who even by Orientalists and non-Muslims is seen to be the figurehead and the founding father of many modern sciences that were able to build upon progress based on the fundamental principles brought forward by Jabir ibn Hayyan. Jabir ibn Hayyan, such as chemistry and physics and the algebra, mathematics and calculus, architecture, the basis and the founding principles that were spread across the Muslim world and beyond. The likes of companions of Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq, Jabir ibn Hayyan, where you find that during that time the Islamic Empire was greater than 75 present day countries, such that the Islamic territories or the Islamic lands stretched from northeast Africa all the way across the Middle Eastern Peninsula into the European shores of Spain and moving far east until the Far Eastern regions. And on the other hand, up till the areas of Samarkand, yani Uzbekistan, present day. For you find within this territory, this entire Muslim land and beyond, the ilm of Imam as-Sadiq spread like a raging fire, meaning that the spread of Tashayyu and the spread of Shi'ism was at its highest. And one of the tasks of Imam Al-Qadim, Ruhi Lahul Fida, was to ensure that this revolution that had reached its peak, this knowledge-based revolution that was so meticulously planned by Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, the guardian of this knowledge-based revolution was Imam Al-Khadim alayhi salam. And Imam Al-Khadim ensured not only was he the guardian of the knowledge-based revolution, but rather Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam would go forward and build on this mass institution of his father Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salam. And you find that there were for certain regions that Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam became the target of Bani Abbas and became a victim of oppression seen by no other person. They leashed out their wrath in its entirety against Imam Al-Qadim, such that no other Ma'soom Imam, and every Imam's tragedy is great, but no other Ma'soom Imam has been imprisoned and tortured in the manner that Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam was imprisoned and tortured. There were reasons for this. Not only did the spread of the Islamic knowledge, not only did the spread of this tashayyu through knowledge spread across the Muslim lands and beyond, but Imam Al-Qadim as the guardian and the head of this knowledge-based revolution himself became a threat to Bani Abbas and the existence of Bani Abbas. For you find that on this knowledge base, when you want to understand why Imam Al-Qadim was a threat to Bani Abbas, you come and you find that number one, the global reach of Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam when it came to spreading Tashayyu and when it came to spreading Shi'ism within the Muslim lands and beyond. Number one, the global reach of Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam through language, through the faculty and the institution of language. فإحنا we have within the Quran وَكُلَّ شَيْءٍ أَحْسَيْنَاهُ فِي إِمَامٍ مُبِينٍ. The Imam selected by Allah Azza wa Jal, the Hujjatullah fil Ard and the Khalifa of Rasulullah, is endowed with ilm over everything. The ilm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is manifested through the Imams. They possess and they contain the ilm of Allah Azza wa Jal, as we read inside of Ziyarat al-Jami'ah. And from all the ilm and knowledge that the Imam possesses of the seen and the unseen, the knowledge in regards to theology and outside of theology, ilm in regards to everything and anything to do with existence, and this includes the ilm or the knowledge of different languages that exist within the realm of existence. And I choose my words very carefully. I do not say world languages spoken by human beings. La. Within the faculty of communication for anything and everything within existence that is able to communicate, the Imam has knowledge of all this. And you find that Imam Al-Khadim alayhi salam played a central role in the spread of tashayyu, on the basis that through the grace of Allah Azza wa Jal, the Imam was multilingual. For we have within our traditions, Hussein ibn Ala, one of the companions, Rahmatullah alayh, of Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam, says that one time Imam Abu al-Hasan yani a kunya that is given to Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam, and within the books of fiqh very popularly known as Abu al-Hasan al-Awwal. For he says Abu al-Hasan yani Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam came to me, he approached me and he said to me, "Oh Hussein, I seek for myself a spouse, a woman who is of Nubian descent." Nubia is a region, the Nubian region in present day, between present day Egypt and Sudan. Hussein ibn Ala says, Ya ibn Rasulullah, and from all the women that you would be able to select as a spouse and all the women that you would take as a spouse, why a woman from Nubia when the most basic of things would be an issue for you, such as communication, because you do not speak their language? And over here Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam says to Hussein ibn Ala that we the Imams are endowed with all the languages. This knowledge of all the languages endowed upon us by Allah Azza wa Jal. And the historians go on to mention that Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam married this woman from Nubian descent and would communicate with her and would speak with her in the Nubian language. And from this woman, Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam was blessed with a son known as Sayyid Ibrahim. Sayyid Ibrahim, during the time of Imam Al-Rida, in the usurped period of Khilafah of Ma'mun, Sayyid Ibrahim alayhi salam stood up in revolution and established the government of Ali Muhammad in the city of Yemen and ruled there, spreading the values, non-violent, peaceful, just values of Tashayyu and Shi'ism, until when he was poisoned in Baghdad and is buried in the vicinity of his father, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far Al-Kadhim alayhi salam. For we have in our traditions that Imam Al-Qadim was able to expand his reach through the faculty of language, where he was not only married a woman from Nubian descent, but as you know, the institution of marriage, such that the family of the woman would also now be in close ties and in close touch, and would be heavily influenced by the akhlaq and the teachings of Imam Al-Khadim, such that this marriage now became a wasila for Shiaism to spread within the Nubian region, and for the roots of Shiaism to be spread over there. This is number one. The fact that the Imam Musa ibn Ja'far Al-Qadim alayhi salam was able to speak the Nubian language. This is one. Number two, we have Hadith al-Sharif, which is mentioned on authority of Ali ibn Hamza, again another companion of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far Al-Qadim alayhi salam wa ruhi lahul fida, where he says that I was within the company of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far Al-Qadim when 30 slaves from Habasha yani Ethiopia, Abyssinia, present day Ethiopian region. He says 30 slaves from Habasha were brought into the city of Medina. Imam Musa ibn Ja'far, yani Imam Abul Hassan, commanded me to go into the market and to purchase the slaves. Now you may think over here that the Ma'sum Imam supported the institution of slavery. Abadan, have a look at what the Imam does. It says they purchased the slaves. Imam, the 30 slaves were who were captured, because as you know, the Islamic territories didn't spread out of peace. Early Islamic history shows you that under the wrongful Khilafah, under usurped Khilafah, that Muslim territory was expanded by force with bloodshed, and religion was used as an excuse to conquer land and territory and amass wealth. Ala kulli. All these skirmishes and these wars used to happen even during the time of Bani Abbas. 30 of these Abyssinians are captured and are brought to Medina as slaves. Imam Al-Khadim alayhi salam commands his companion Ali ibn Hamza to purchase the slaves and to bring them into the house. Ali ibn Hamza says, I was taken by shock when I saw that as these 30 Ethiopian men entered into the house of Imam Al-Qadim, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far Ruhi Lahul Fida began to speak with them within the Ethiopian language. It says these 30 men began to cry and to weep. And after their conversation with Imam Al-Qadim handed one of them a bag full of money, liberated them, and asked them to go back to their land, and made one person in charge of the 29 to ensure their financial growth and success and independence as they returned back to Ethiopia. Know that each and every one of these 30 people through this one seating became from the Shias and the followers of Imam Al-Qadim, and then went on to spread the message of Shiaism and the Imamat of Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam within Ethiopia. Hi, number 2 example. Number 3, we have within our traditions, again mentioned by Alama al-Majlisi rahmatullah alayhi in Biharul Anwar, where he states, Hadith Sharif states that there are people who came to visit, or there was a person who came to visit Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam, wa kana rajulun min ahli sin. There was a person who had come to visit Imam Musa ibn Ja'far when he was from the Far East. Ahl Sin, Sin today is translated as China. But in essence, Ahl Sin within the Hadith is an expression of the Far East region, China, Japan, Hadani, Far East. It says he came to visit Imam Musa ibn Ja'far. Shufu ta'ammalu. Pay attention to this Hadith al-Sharif, which is narrated by Alama Majlisi rahmatullah alayhi in Bihar. A person from the Far East comes to visit Imam Al-Qadim to ask him questions in regards to Masail Shar'iyya, to ask him jurisprudential questions, meaning that there in the Far East at that time, there was already a community of people who subscribed to the school of Shiaism and attested to the wilaya of Amirul Mu'mineen and Imam Hassan and Imam Al-Hussein and Sajjad and Bakir and Sadiq. And now they come to the Imam Zaman of their time, seeking knowledge in issues of jurisprudence. Yani shufu, this revolution of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, to what extent it had reached the Far East region. The Rawi mentions that I was seated over there and I was surprised to see Imam Musa ibn Ja'far Al-Qadim alayhi salam speak to this person from seen in his own dialect and in his own language. Again, as the person left, the companion says, Imam Al-Qadim asked me, and are you surprised at the fact that I speak the language of the Far East? He said, yes, Ya Ibn Rasulullah. Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam says to him, and the knowledge that you see from us is but a drop of the knowledge endowed upon us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Global reach of the Imam on the basis that he was multilingual and spoke these multiple languages. Hujjatullah fil ardh. In fact, traditions go forward and traditions, books of history establish for us that the mother of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far Al-Qadim alayhi salam, a woman by the name of Sayyida Hamida. Sayyida Hamida in essence was from Andalus. Andalus, yani the region of present-day Spain and Portugal. As you know, the land of Spain and Portugal was forcefully conquered by the Muslims under one of the most bloodiest conquests that are seen in the name of religion. And you have that within the Christian empire as they went forward with the Crusades and they expanded their territory, they conquered and they shed blood in the name of religion. How the same thing with the Muslims. This doesn't negate the validity or the correctness, if you could say, of a certain religion. No, but it shows us how religion, pure and divine as it is, can be corrupted by political motive. In any case, the mother of Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam was a woman from the land of Andalus, present-day Portugal. She was from the dwellers, the citizens, the residents of present-day Spain and Portugal. And tribally, she came from the tribe of Berber, the Berberia tribe of North Africa that had settled within the land of Portugal and Spain, Andalus as is known. You find that Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam's mother was from that region. For Imam Al-Qadim and before him Imam Al-Sadiq alayhi salam were able to speak the Berberi language and were able to influence the tribes. And when Sayyida Hamida married into this family, there are two deductions that can be brought historically. Number one, either that she already subscribed to the school of Ali Muhammad, because a mother of an Imam has to be a pure woman, as per deduction from Ziyarat Waritha. Ashhadu annaka kunta nuran fil aslab al-shamikha wal arham al-mutahhara lam tunajjiska al-jahiliyatu bi anjasiha. We say to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Aba Abdullah Ruhi lahul fida Sayyid al-Shuhada, I bear witness that you are a light that was transferred in the spines or in the backs of pure men and was transferred. This light, this nur was transferred in the wombs of pure women. Lam tunajjiskal. This najasa of jahiliyyah, you were pure and untouched from it. Hence, Sayyida Hamida, by deduction, was a believer, and purity. So from here we understand either purity in that she was on this deen of Nabiullah Ibrahim, and then was brought towards the light of Ali Muhammad by Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, or number two, she was already a believer and her family within the wilayah of Ali Muhammad. But either way, this marriage in itself now became a door to introduce tashayyu' to the Barbary people and the Barbary region. Global reach of Imam Al-Khadim alayhi salam when it came to spreading tashayyu'. In fact, we have again in Bihar, Alama Majlisi Rahmatullah alayhi, where he states that Harun al-Abbasi on multiple occasions attempted to assassinate the Ma'soom Imam. And he says at one time, the Imam gave an assassination command to the closest people around him, from the highest ranking military officials, to go and to behead Imam Al-Qadim while he would be in prostration in one of the jails. And each and every one of the prison guards or the military officials were reluctant to shed the blood of Imam Al-Qadim. The Ma'soom Imam had a haiba inside of him. For much as there were haters of Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam, there were those who had reluctance just because of the haiba and the nur of the Imam. And you find this Yawm al-Ashura as well. For Yawm al-Ashura, when Sayyid al-Shuhada was attacked from every direction, and he falls off his horse and performs the sajda, and then he lies on the plains of Karbala. Umar ibn Sa'ad al-La'in sends out a number of his mercenaries to go and slay Imam al-Hussein. They stand and they circle Aba Abdullah alayhi salam, Ruhi lahul fida, for an X amount of time, and they return back to Umar ibn Sa'ad al-La'in. Umar asks them, did you not kill Hussein ibn Ali? They say to him, we have been taken back by the nur emanating from his face. The face of this blessed Imam, much as it was covered in blood and sand, nur emanating from him, that even made them reluctant. But despite this, ila jahannam wa bi'sal masir, because even this did not stop them from committing the most atrocious crime in history. For the people, there were some around Harun, they were reluctant. And Harun, in addition to this, was even reluctant that there might be a mass uprising from the people if he was blamed, or if he was seen to be the perpetrator who caused the assassination of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim. Hadith al-Sharif, Alama al-Majlisi Rahmatullah alayhi states that Harun al-Abbasi then made arrangements for a group of mercenaries from a community known as Al-Afranj. Al-Afranj, yani present day, what is known as the region of present day France. Yani at that time there were the Franks. These were a collection of Germanic tribes that later on came on to settle at the border of the Roman Empire. And these were people who were not any lesser than the Moguls in terms of their atrocities, in terms of their harshness, in terms of their viciousness, their thirst for shedding blood and conquering and conquests. These were, you could almost say, mercenary tribes that were hired by governments and institutions and other tribes to go and plunder and loot. Elite assassins. Harun says, bring me a group of these mercenaries who know nothing about Islam, lest they are affected by the haibah of Imam Al-Khadim alayhi salam. Bring me atheists from foreign lands, and I could use them as assassins who would come and slay Imam Al-Khadim. The narration mentions that a group of 50 of the Al-French, 50 of these assassins from the Roman lands, from the Germanic tribes, were brought to Baghdad, sent into the prison to assassinate Imam Al-Qadim. Hadith al-Sharif says, the moment they entered into the prison and the Imam was in a state of sajdah, hayba of the Hujjatullah fil ard. Assalamu alayka ya Nur Allah fi ardih. Hadith al-Sharif says, Imam Al-Qadim stood up and gazed at them. One glance from the Ma'sum Imam. Alama Majlisi Rahmatullah alayhi says that this group of Germanic tribes who had come as assassins threw their weapons on the ground and fell down in prostration out of awe and respect to the Ma'sum Imam. Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam spoke to them in their native Franco language. They refused, disobeyed the command of Harun, left the prison weeping, and returned back to their lands. Hadith ends over here. And in a very humble capacity, I would add that people who are affected by the haibah of this nature, in such a nature, by Imam Al-Qadim, it would not be a far-fetched conclusion if one delved into the depths of the books of history to see if there were roots of Shiaism within that community because of their interaction with Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Qadim. Ruhi lahul fida. The global outreach of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far on the basis of language, ilm endowed upon him by Allah Azza wa Jal, through which Shiaism spread across the vast Muslim nations, transgressing or surpassing the limitations of race and ethnicity. Not only this, in addition to this, Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam had built himself a reputation in the Muslim lands for setting up a parallel independent social program for the citizens of the state, free, parallel, and independent of the government of the time. As you know, the government of Bani Abbas usurped the lands of people, heavily taxed the people. People lived in severe austerity. People lived in poverty with no shape or form of any sort of government assistance. Rather, within the state of poverty, they were forced to pay ridiculously high amounts of taxes to the government. This tax money that was then spent to fulfill the base desires and the luxuries of the ruling royal family. And in this circumstance, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Qadim Ruhi lahul fida comes forward and initiates this social, or establishes these social initiatives, such that there was an initiative known as Surratul Musa. Surratul Musa, Surra yani the Imam was known that people who would come to him, or rather the Imam would go out of his way to find people in poverty and give them bags of 10 dirhams. Small cloth bags that would be tied together. This is known as a Surra with 10 dirhams inside. Capital. Yalla. With this money, go buy land. With this money, start farming. With this money, start trading. With this money, get a roof over your head. With this money, do this, do that. Built economic or promoted economic independence and promoted economic independence and gave financial aid to a nation that was suppressed and oppressed by their government. Tayyib, you can imagine the reservations that Bani Abbas as a government had against initiatives such as these. Bain al-Qawsayn Ahibai, between brackets, this also highlights the importance of khums. Because Imam Al-Qadim to a great extent used all his wealth. But in addition, these social initiatives where the Shias of Al Muhammad would be able to live a life of dignity under the reigns of an oppressive, tyrannical government, Imam Al-Qadim ensured that for this initiative to be successful, the people, the Shias who are better off and well off, even in the Muslim lands or other Muslim lands, would be paying their khums such that they would be a source of funding for financial initiatives and social initiatives such as these. وَلِذَلِكَ, they say with the Hadith Sharif that the khums is the property and the property of the Imam. And the Imam on the Day of Judgment will come to those who didn't pay their khums and will say to Allah, Ya Allah, to paraphrase the Hadith, Fulan and Fulan, these people, they usurped my right in the dunya. Allahu Akbar! Usurped, yani ghasbi. Can anyone imagine? Leave the terror, leave the punishment, the humiliation and the embarrassment of being held by Imam al-Hujjah in front of Allah. And the Imam al-Hujjah says, this one is a ghasib, did the ghasb of my wealth. In this day and age, payment of khums to ensure that these social, religious initiatives are funded for is our responsibility and our duty. And you have many incidences within the life of Imam Al-Khadim and after the life of Imam Al-Khadim that show that even those who are entrusted to be wukala or wakils of Imam Al-Khadim succumbed to their desires and were overcome by shaitan and usurped the khums of the Imam, committed some of the biggest frauds while being entrusted with the position of a trustee of the wealth of the Imam. Tara, history repeats itself. In any case, for you find that Imam Al-Kadhim's global reach by way of language, Imam Al-Kadhim's popularity from the fact that, or in the sense that, he initiated and executed social initiatives to relieve people from poverty and to enable them and empower them to live a life of dignity. Number 3, the ilm of Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam. The ilm of Imam Al-Qadim, such that historians mention that this was the ilm of Imam Al-Qadim. He was known from his ilm even during the time of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And there are many indications within the book of history that even during the time of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, even though Imam Sadiq alayhi salam headed the madrasa ilmiya or the hawza ilmiya, that Imam Sadiq was the head of this knowledge-based revolution, an integral part of this knowledge-based movement under the leadership of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam was Imam Al-Qadim Ruhi Lahul Fida. Which is why the historians mention at one time during the life of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, when Imam Al-Qadim was still a young child, Abu Hanifa walks into the house of Imam Sadiq. And you know, Abu Hanifa contrary to what popular belief is, Abu Hanifa studied for 2 years under Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam. And it is not that he became a faqih and a great alim on the basis that he was a student of Imam as-Sadiq. La, abadan la. In fact, to mention that Abu Hanifa was a student of Imam as-Sadiq and to take it as a matter of pride, in essence, is an insult, because some of the jurisprudential deductions that Abu Hanifa came with, it would be an embarrassment to say that he was a student of Imam as-Sadiq. Imam as-Sadiq's products, Imam Sadiq's, the products of his teachings and the caliber of his students, the students that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam raised and nourished were much more higher in caliber of taqwa, ilm and deduction than the likes of Abu Hanifa. Students of Imam Sadiq are the like of Hisham ibn Hakam, Mufaddal ibn Umar, and Zurara, Muhammad ibn Muslim. Adani, these are students of Imam Sadiq. Abu Hanifa, la. He attended the classes of Imam as-Sadiq, such that this attribution that I am a student of Imam as-Sadiq would buy me credibility within the masses. Sometimes to affiliate yourself with a personality is only done for a publicity stunt, such that you yourself can get credibility. You as an individual have no credibility. The only way you can purchase this credibility in the eyes of the people is if you associate, affiliate, and attribute yourself to somebody much greater. هذا هو Abu Hanifa. And in essence, he looked for many times where he would find mistakes or try and criticize Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam. But the narrations mention that at one time Abu Hanifa walks into the house of Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, observing the house, waiting to nitpick and find the issues, shakumak, within the something that I can pick on and find the mistake to show that I'm greater or as knowledgeable as Imam as-Sadiq. Ruhi lahul fida. He says that the narration, and Abu Hanifa narrates himself. He says within the narration that Abu Hanifa inside of the house sees Imam Musa ibn Ja'far, Ruhi lahul fida, at a young age reciting salat. And as he was reciting salat, people were passing in front of him. People of the house, low visitors, they were walking in front of him, one to the right, one to the left, so on and so forth. Imam Al-Qadim, as he was praying, people were walking in front of him. He completed his salah as if everything is fine. Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam came out to visit Abu Hanifa. They sat down. Abu Hanifa comes to Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam and he says to him, Ya Aba Abdullah, you know your son Musa? He was praying salat while people were walking in front of him. Intum shaifeen, when you go to Makkah al-Mukarramah or you go to Medina al-Munawwara, sometimes when you have from the Mukhalifeen or from the Nawasib, some of them when they are praying and they're standing up, try walking in front of them, so they put their hand over there. They don't let you pass. Sahilola. Shufu where the roots of all these thinking come in. So he goes and he complains to Imam as-Sadiq. He says to him, Ya Aba Abdullah, your son Musa, he was praying salat while people are walking in front of him. Hafiz salat is batil. Enter here the teacher of all teachers, and your son is reciting salat while people are walking in front of him. Maybe your son's salat is batil. You didn't teach your son this. This is the context in which Abu Hanifa is speaking to Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam. Imam as-Sadiq says to him, really? Let us see what the boy has to say. Yani Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq alayhi salam, Imam as-Sadiq could have answered to Abu Hanifa. But Imam as-Sadiq takes this opportunity to exhibit the ilm of Imam Al-Khadim at this young age. Imam as-Sadiq calls his son, Ya Aba Ibrahim, one of the titles of Imam Al-Khadim alayhi salam, Abu Ibrahim alayhi salam. He calls Imam Musa ibn Ja'far inside. And he says to him, Oh son, this is Abu Hanifa. He says, you were praying. He says, yes, father, I was praying. He says, and while you were praying, people were walking in front of you, moving around in front of you. He says, yes. Abu Hanifa says, doesn't this disrupt your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that while you are praying, people are walking in front of you? this violates or this disrupts your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The conversation going that this leads towards the invalidity of your salat. Imam Al-Qadim Ruhi Lahul Fida replies to Abu Hanifa and says to him, the people walking in front of me while I'm in a state of salat does not affect the validity of my salat, does not disrupt my connection with the Lord, because the Lord who I am praying to, as per the Quran, he says, وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ, and we are closer to you than your jugular vein. Allahu Akbar. Connection with Allah Azza wa Jal is built on spirituality. In this sense, Abu Hanifa quiet. وهكذا, and like this, there are many incidents where Imam Al-Khadim alayhi salam went out and exhibited his ilm. For you see that through the fact that he had a global reach and was able to communicate and relate with masses of different ethnicities, and the language was not a barrier across the Muslim nations, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam was able to expand the teachings of Ali Muhammad and Tashayyu beyond the borders of ethnicity, culture and language. Number two, he was the fountainhead of these social initiatives that made the people independent and empowered them to live in dignity under the reins of a tyrannical government. And number three, the fact that Imam Al-Qadim exhibited his a'lamiyya in the fact that he is the only and the most knowledgeable source of interpretation of divine text. These three elements put together jeopardized the legitimacy of the rule of Bani Abbas. Because the people would come and they would say, if there is a true Khalif on the face of this earth who can claim to be the successor of Rasulullah, there is no one more deserving of this than Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajah. For Bani Abbas have nothing to show. Yet they are at the helm of the throne on the basis that they are the Khulafa of Allah, the Khulafa of Rasulullah. For they show Imam Al-Khadim alayhi salam as a direct threat to their rulership, to their empire. And if you understand this, you also begin to understand why Bani Abbas Lu'ana took such a harsh stance against Imam Al-Qadim. The foundations of their throne and their rulership, the basis of their rulership began to tremble and crumble with the presence of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Qadim alayhi salam. And hence, Bani Abbas, to counter the threat of Imam al-Qadim, Ruhi Lahul Fida, undertook a number of measures. The first initiative nationwide, and when I say nationwide, an initiative that was imposed throughout the Muslim land, is that Harun al-Abbasi approached Malik ibn Anas, one of the students of Abu Hanifa. He went and he approached Malik ibn Anas and instructed him to begin the compilation of the text Al-Muwatta, the Kitab Al-Muwatta. Instructed him to compile this one book, Kitab Al-Muwatta, that would become the basis of hadith and the basis of jurisprudence. One single text that would forcefully be imposed as the only book of fiqh and tradition to be followed and to be taught within the Muslim lands. Harun says to Malik ibn Anas, compile the book, and it is upon us, the government, to ensure that the teachings of this book is enforced. Kitab al-Muwatta in print even till today. Ahibai. This was Bani Abbas, Kitab al-Muwatta, and the publicity behind Tarweej, yani publicity and bigging up the names of individuals such as Malik ibn Anas was such that there were people who were planted to be an alternate source of guidance outside of Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam. Look at what Harun says. Even when you go and you look at the history of Kitab al-Muwatta, you find that Harun says to Malik ibn Anas that when you write this book, and we will implement this book as the sole book of jurisprudence and tradition hadith, this one book will be the reason through which, or will be the cause through which we are able to do away with multiple interpretations of texts and disintegration. We will unite the Ummah together through Kitab al-Muwatta. Kitab al-Muwatta, such that open Kitab al-Muwatta and see how many traditions do you find from Ahlul Kisa. Within Kitab al-Muwatta, how many traditions or hadith do you find from Amir al-Mu'mineen or Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen or Imam Hassan or Imam al-Hussein? Ahl al-Kisa, those who without any doubt are from Ayat al-Tathir and purified by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Amir al-Mu'mineen, who Rasulullah says according to the Amma and the Khasa, Aliyun ma'al Qur'an wal Qur'anu ma'a Ali. How many of the hadith of Amir al-Mu'mineen are in Kitab al-Muwatta? And how is it that an entire parallel school of fiqh was initiated, advertised, and enforced? An entire school of fiqh, the Malikis, in opposition or to counter the teachings of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far. But this is the first initiative Bani Abbas took, and Harun al-Abbas in particular, al-La'in. And in parallel to this, Imam Al-Khadim alayhi salam was subject to imprisonment. Imprisonment under some of the harshest conditions conceivable by man. Historians are of the opinion that Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim Ruhillahu al-Fida was imprisoned for a total of between 15 to 20 years of his life. Wa musibata, over the conditions in which Imam al-Qadim was imprisoned. Ahibai. And as I take you through some of these circumstances and describe to you some of the circumstances in which Imam al-Qadim alayhi salam was imprisoned, leading to his masa'ib, ahibai, Intum on this night, take your heart to Medina to Salam. Take your heart to Baghdad, to the city of Kadhim. Liberate your soul, purify your soul by closing your eyes and take your heart and take your soul into the Sahan of Imam al-Qadim in Baghdad and Imam al-Jawad. And it is as if you are in front of these two shining kubbas. And you are able to feel from the bottom of your heart the serenity of the haram of Imam Al-Qadim. And as you walk closer and closer through the sahan and into the room of the darih of Imam Al-Jawad and Imam Al-Qadim, you are able to smell the fragrance of musk that emanates from this darih al-Mubarak. And it is as if you are listening to this musibah and this masa'ib from the haram of Imam Al-Qadim. The narrations mention 15 to 20 years of imprisonment for Imam Al-Qadim in some of the most harshest of conditions. He was imprisoned in multiple cities, imprisoned in Basra and imprisoned in Baghdad. And in Baghdad he was moved from one prison to another. His family in the city of Medina, daughters and sons growing up under harsh conditions in the absence of their father as Imam Al-Qadim is imprisoned. The family left under the guidance and the watchful eye of Imam Al-Rida. Ruhi lahul fida, Gharib al-Tus. The narrations and the historians mention that Imam Al-Qadim sometimes was subjected to imprisonment in general prisons, and sometimes he was subjected to solitary confinement, sometimes in regular prisons and sometimes in underground dungeons. And for the time that he was in imprisonment, there would be one meal that was thrown to Imam Al-Qadim. They would give him one glass of stale water and one piece of stale bread. And when Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam was transferred to the jail of Sindhi, this one glass of water and this one piece of stale bread was reduced to half a glass of stale water and half a glass of stale bread. In addition to solitary confinement, there were times that Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam was imprisoned in a Tamura. Tamura, as we spoke, similar to the imprisonment of Imam Al-Hadi, a Tamura was an underground prison, a tunnel or a hole that is dug 10 to 15 feet deep into the ground, not more than 3 to 4 feet in its width. Imam Al-Qadim was imprisoned in this. Imam Al-Qadim himself says that when I was inside of this Tamura, I was not able to move. Ahibai, when the Ma'asum Imam says that he was subjected to imprisonment in this underground hole, perhaps not more than 6 to 7 feet in height and not more than 4 to 5 feet in terms of its width, the Imam says, I am not able to move. I thought about this statement. Why did the Ma'asum Imam say I was not able to move? Do you know that even in today's day and age, when you have prisoners of the highest level, such as terrorists or suspected terrorists, they are subjected in imprisonment to a certain position known as the stress position, which means that the convict or the prisoner is subjected to remain in a single position. Either you squat or you stand or you are hung upside down, but you are in a single position and not allowed to change any bodily position until your entire body begins to cramp up. As your body cramps up, you are subjected to such emotional and psychological trauma, your entire body begins to shut down. Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam says, when I was not able to move, ma'anaha, he was subjected to this imprisonment in this Tamura underground hole that was so narrow. His entire body and the muscles within the body began to cramp up due to this stress position. Allahu Akbar. Imam himself says that at one time when I was in the imprisonment inside of this Tamur underground hole, Imam Al-Khadim says I was so constricted inside. It was becoming difficult for me to breathe. Imam Al-Khadim says with great difficulty, I lifted myself up to the top of the hole, to the top of the Tamur, so that I could get some fresh air. He says, as soon as I lifted myself a little bit above the hole, enough to get some air, he says, Sahik ibn Sindi was standing there and he would kick me on my chest and kick me on my head. Allah Akbar. He would kick the Imam multiple times on the chest and on the head and on the face. Imam Al-Khadim says, and this did not even hurt me as much as what he did after. Yabna Rasulullah, what did he do? Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam says that is from the very top of the prison in order to upset me and in order to torture me and in order to hurt me. Sahik al-La'in would begin insulting my mother, Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. How hurtful could this have been to the heart of Imam Al-Khadim that this Nasib Najis La'in, taking the name of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, Allah, but insulting and abusing Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. The narrations mention that in these circumstances, Imam Al-Khadim alayhi salam was subjected to imprisonment. Within the ziyarah of Imam Al-Qadim, we read, As-salamu ala dhishaki al-mardud bil-halak al-kuyud. You send salams on the Imam whose hands and legs were shackled. But in this ziyarah of Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam, we say, peace be upon the one whose leg was shackled with weights. Allahu Akbar. Today I read in the books that when they chained the legs of Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam, they chained him by the hands and they chained him by the legs. When they chained the legs of Imam Al-Qadim, they attached these metal chains to metal or steel weights, and each weight tied to the leg of the Imam was not less than 15 kilograms. The Imam was not even able to move. This was the reason of the weight. And within the ziyarah of Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam, we read, peace be upon the one whose bones, the bones in his legs were crushed due to the manner in which the chains were so tightly shackled around his legs. Allahu Akbar. When they imprisoned Imam Al-Qadim, the metal chains were tied so tightly around his legs such that they crushed the shins of Imam Al-Qadim. And when I hear this, my heart goes back to Imam Zain al-Abidin, Mawlana Imam Zain al-Abidin. For this is Imam Al-Qadim who has metal chains tied around his legs such that they crush the bones. And over there we had his grandfather Imam Zainul Abidin. When he was entering into Sham, they made him wear a spike, a collar with metal spikes that were piercing the neck of Imam Sajjad, such that the Rawi mentions that when Imam Zainul Abidin was brought into Sham, the Rawi says, I thought, why would Zainul Abidin come into Sham wearing a red shirt? Allah, Allah. The Rawi says, I went closer to Zainul Abidin. I see that in essence it wasn't even a red shirt, it was a white shirt, but the amount of blood that was flowing from his neck had dyed the entire shirt red. Allah, 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 for the tragedies of all Muhammad. The narrations mention that Imam Al-Qadim alayhi salam was imprisoned under such conditions. And despite this, Bani Abbas were not at ease so long as Imam Musa ibn Ja'far was alive amongst them. So Harun al-Abbasi then plotted for Imam al-Qadim to be poisoned with dates. The historians mention that they inserted the poison into the dates, they brought it into the prison, and they forced Imam al-Qadim to eat them. Imam al-Qadim ate a handful of the poison dates, and the effects of the poison began to overcome the body and the complexion of Imam al-Qadim. The narrations mention that because of the intensity of the poison on the first day, already in the first hours, the complexion of Imam al-Qadim began to turn into red. His entire body was reddened as the poison began to take its toll on him. Eventually, the complexion of Imam al-Qadim changed. He was absolutely pale. Allah, Allah. The impact of the poison was such that Imam al-Qadim reached a stage where he was not able to move his body. Allah, Allah. Yani the effect of the poison was such that apart from the heat and the intensity, this poison was such that it would begin to make the limbs inefficient. Yani ineffective. A person is not able to move his limbs anymore, becomes paralyzed due to this poison that was said. The Imam would then, with great difficulty, turn towards the right and turn towards the left. The Imam was unable to move his body due to the intensity of the poison. All this time, the body of the Imam was still shackled in chains, and the weights were still attached to his leg. The poison was such that the Imam was not able to move, was in intense pain, but the mouth of the Imam had also dried up. The blessed mouth of Imam al-Qadim, with the intensity of the poison, the Imam was overcome with thirst, but not able to drink water. Allah, Allah. وإمام الكاظم باب الحوائج. It is as if you share in the tragedy and the thirst of your grandfather Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. In this manner, Imam al-Kadhim, alone in the prison in Baghdad, as the effects of the poison began to overcome the Imam strayed down on the ground and he straightened his legs and he stretched out his arms. The sweat of death began to drip down his forehead. The Imam took a deep breath, and the soul of Imam al-Qadim left his body. Rahimallahu man nada wa imama wa kadima. The lifeless body of Imam al-Qadim in the prison, still bound with shackles and with chains. The narrations mention and the historians state that Harun al-Abbas then commanded for the lifeless body of Imam al-Qadim, the janazah of Imam al-Qadim, to be taken on to the streets and to be left on the bridge of Baghdad for 3 days. They took the body of Imam al-Qadim. His hands were still bound with chains. His legs were still bound with chains. The janazah of the Mashum Imam left on the bridge of Baghdad for 3 days under the scorching sun. All this time they had a caller from the people of Bani Abbas shout out, "O Rafida, where are the Shia? Where are the Shia? This is the Imam of the Rafida. The Imam who you claim has ilm of the seen and the unseen. Come and see the lifeless body of your Imam." The Rawi says, as the janazah of Imam al-Qadim on the streets of Baghdad, the people would walk by the janazah, kicking the face and the chest of Imam al-Qadim. Wa imama wa madluma. This is the tragedy of the Ai of Al Muhammad. Here the body of Imam al-Qadim 3 days unburied on the bridge, and over there in Karbala, the body of Abu Abdullah on the plains, on the deserts of Karbala, without a ghusl and a kafan, a body whose bones have been trampled, a body whose bones have been trampled, while this sister Zainab watches. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Matam Hussein, Matam Imam Al-Qadim. Ya Hussein wa Qadima wa Husseina.